Small
Once
world.
everyone's disoriented and wondering what the hell is happening, we're just mucking about. We start at 8 or whatever the local time it is. For Peter in Western Australia, we start at 4 a.m. Peter.
Wow.
I mean, putting a shift in there, sir. Good. Thank you for joining us.
So, Peter, are you late to bed or early to rise?
I'm just woken up.
Wow. Don't worry, we'll send you back to sleep within about 10 minutes. I see in Indiana there's a place called English. That would be a great trip to set off on a long mission to get to English, Indiana. I'd like that. I'm going to Google what that looks like.
I think you've just set Al on the hunt for his next book plan. But the
thing
he can't fly there. He's going to have to find a way to get there without flying.
Oh, wow. So my giant map of all of America has this little place called English on, but there's only 645 people that lives there, which suggests that Indiana must be quite empty. It looks quite boring on Google Images.
Well, you're not allowed to call it anywhere boring.
No, you're not allowed to call anywhere boring.
What the book is about. Places that aren't boring, they're very interesting when you look at them, as we shall discuss after the hour when we stop mucking about. At least, so normally in the bit before we get started, the authors aren't as voluble as Mr. Humphreys, and I end up reading from something. So you've been deprived of a reading from Laurie Lee's As I Walked Out One Midsummer Morning, a book which I know is close to Al's heart because it inspired one of his other books that we featured. So so you've missed that, but you've had the New Harmony Indiana chat and the 4 a.m. in Western Australia chat.
That is very interesting, but I would rather I'd rather hear from Lance talking about Indiana, or now I'd like to hear about Donna talking about skinny dipping on the northeast, south, and west of Celsius. Now I'm having to Google where Celsius. Let's see if that's in Indiana.
Right.
Oh no, that's in Sussex.
No. I'm sorry. It's 8 o'clock. Everyone.
Oh, sorry.
Back in the
I'll
room.
behave now.
Back in the room. This. Welcome to Adventurous Inc. Hang on, let me pin myself. I mean, you can probably see me because I'm chatting. Hello, everybody. My name's Tim Frenno. I'm the host and curator of Adventurous Inc. I can see it's going to be a wild ride tonight. We've set the bar pretty high with Skinny Dip chat, 4 a.m. in Western Australia chat, and New Harmony Indiana chat, and it's all because of the legend that is Alastair Humphreys. Al, thank you so much for joining us. I've lost you on my screen. I'm going to try and find you to pin you and bring you in. Al, say something and that'll help me find you. I'm sure it will.
Hello, Tim, and hello, everyone else. And thank you very much, everyone, for joining in. I'm a big fan of Adventurous Inc., so hope we can have an interesting chat. Have you found me?
Have now. There we go. So we're both pinned. Fabulous. Well, Al, you certainly brought the crowds. Thank you so much for helping spread the word. And you're the author that we've featured most in Adventurous Inc. So we featured 4 of your books, but this is the first time that we've actually got around to having a chat and featuring you in our podcast. So must apologize for that. You even beat me. You even featured me on your podcast before I'd got you on mine. I've got to tell you, no one else has ever featured me on their podcast. I mean, that was a high point. So obviously, we're here to discuss Al's latest book, Local, which is a brilliant read, and I think, as you'll hear, it's a bit of a departure for Al from his regular adventure stuff. Although I detect a certain direction of travel that I think we'll talk about, from those wild adventures and the really big things that people want to do, like rowing the Atlantic and cycling around the world, to the things that can bring meaning to our lives in everyday life. And I get the sense that is the direction that Al was going. I know when we featured this one in the subscription, so many subscribers were excited about it, either because they'd already got a book and they were going to pass the one that I sent them on to friends and family, or because they'd skipped it, but they were already on with the map. So if you're already on researching your local map, finding your local summits and all that, let us know in the chat. So this is the way it's going to work. I'm going to ask some questions. I mean, I've got genuinely pages and pages and pages of questions to ask this gentleman. But you can ask your own questions too. So ask your questions in the chat. I might not ask it straight away because I might try and weave it in as we go through. But yeah, it's as much your conversation as it is mine. So yeah, feel free to throw your questions into the chat and we'll take it from there. And do let us know how you're getting on exploring your local map. So yeah, Al, thank you so much for joining us. From the heart
Thank you for having me. I'm multitasking here because I'm mostly being nosy about everyone's Zoom backgrounds. My current favorite so far is Yvette Short's artwork. That's fantastic in the background. But sorry, carry on. Ask me a question. Sorry.
No, let's just look at everyone's let's look at everyone's backdrops. That would be fun, wouldn't it? But Al, I really, I think this is testimony to kind of, I think, why we've had to increase our capacity 3 times tonight, because you know, you're just great with folk, and I think that really sings through all the books. We'll talk about some of the people you met as well, but that friendliness and that making all of this stuff easy and approachable is I think a real talent that you've got. So from all your fans and supporters, thank you, because it's fab. But I know when you started this book, you kind of had to start with a bit of an apology, didn't you, about a bit more of an activist tone and a bit of a change of direction. Tell us why you felt the need to do something different and then explain it to people.
Well, I didn't really start with an apology. It was more that I ended with an apology. So when I started the project, trying to spend a whole year exploring one map, I thought I was going to write a book like Micro Adventures that I wrote 10 years ago. So I thought I was just going to write about the usual sort of stuff that I've been writing about for ages of, oh, here's some fun places that you can go camping, biking, running, but closer to home than ever. That's what I thought I was going to do. But the more that the year progressed, the more it became more about sort of environmental concerns that I was having. And then the book ended up being quite different to the sort of usual micro adventure stuff. And therefore, when I finished writing it, I felt I'd better start with a bit of an explanation for that, because I was concerned that some people would pick up the book just because they'd enjoyed reading maybe about the big adventures that I used to do or the micro adventures that I've done, and then get a bit annoyed that it was just me ranting about land use or land access and stuff like that. So that was why I put my little disclaimer explainer in.
I mean, I think it's really interesting because it kind of marks a bit of a journey, doesn't it? And I think it's a similar sort of journey that we've been on through Adventurous Inc. and the stories that we've told and the books that we've shared. And so my guess is that subscribers won't have been that surprised by the tone, because I think it's a level of concern that's there for anyone who takes the time to look at stuff. And that's, you know, that's what the book is about, isn't it? It's about taking the time to look at stuff, and when you do that deeply, it clearly gave you cause for concern.
Yeah, definitely. And I've spent a lot of time close to where I live, just running around the woods and riding my bike and sleeping in bivy bags and camping and stuff like that. And the landscape really just being a nice, pretty, scenic backdrop to all of my adventuring. And this was the first time that I've ever really paused enough so that the backdrop actually moves to being the foreground of the thing. So yeah, it's quite a different change of tone, certainly from something like when I cycled around the world. Say I cycled across Africa, and that was a wonderful, privileged, brilliant experience. But looking back, and I loved being out in nature and in the wild places, but they were kind of like a stage painted backdrop to me getting on doing my thing. It was very beautiful, but I wasn't particularly deeply immersed in it. So this was quite a change in the way I look at things, I suppose. And I don't know if that's just because it was slower and me paying more attention and deliberately focusing on that, or if it's just a symptom of me getting old. I suspect probably a bit of both.
You and me and all of us, none of us are getting any younger, are we? That's the. But I loved, because you talked in the book, didn't you, about how when you're out on your expeditions, nature was a bit of a backdrop, and isn't that fascinating that you've been to all these like natural wonders and the hotspots of the world for biodiversity and stuff like that, and yet it was only when you slowed down and took it in at home that it really started to mean something to you. I think that's remarkable and really powerful.
Yeah, I think a comparative way of thinking about it is that for like we all do, I guess, we watch the David Attenborough programs and we see the polar bears looking sad on a little bit of ice, and we see the Amazon getting chopped down, and we all get sad and think, oh, this is really bad. But then I tend to think, oh, well, I can't fix the Arctic, and the Amazon's too big, and I don't even know where to begin on this, so I'll just be sad for a bit, and then I'll go have a cup of tea, and then I'll just get on with my life. That's been my sort of feeling about the state of the world for forever, really. But in this experience, I was just in the same little bit of land, just seeing it week, and so it all could sink in much more. And also, I think there's less scope for just hiding behind the excuse that it's massive when there's quite small things close to home that perhaps you can address and take some sort of care of. And I think if you can start to pay attention to your local stuff, and if everyone paid attention to their local stuff, then the big world stuff would take care of itself.
So let's start with that close to home. Sharon has just commented in the chat that she went out and bought a customized map when you started talking about this. So have you got your map there? We should have planned this in advance. Have you got your map?
I do have my map here.
Show us the map.
Yes. I've also got, if you want some props, I've got a plastic pig that I found when I was walking around my map, which I was delighted by. Best of all,
yay, donks.
Got a plastic pig. I also got I've also got the head of an action man that I found exploring my map. But in order to actually sensibly answer your question, yes, I have my map here.
Sensible answers are not necessarily required in Adventurous Incal. You'll soon get the hang of it. It's nonsense, absolute nonsense, stuff and nonsense. And it's amazing. So Amy's asking in the chat if anyone's got any advice on getting customized maps in the United States, because it's, for us Brits, it's easy to forget how wonderfully served we are with the Ordnance Survey. Look, you're looking up where to get personalized maps in the United States, aren't you?
Yeah, usgs.gov. They're the topo maps. Yeah, you can. So in America, so in Britain, you can buy these big, large paper maps. In the US, from the US Gov website, you can download PDFs of the bits that you live on. So there's pros and cons, I suppose. But yeah, they're the similar sort of notion. It's this 1 to 7,500 topo series in America, I think, is what you're after. But so these are the English ones for anyone who, those of you who don't have them. I see David Willis is reading his as we speak. Look at that. Fantastic. He's my beautiful Debbie McGee assistant. So David, if you could show us the map. Thank you very much. Look at that. He is earning his subscription here. Each grid square, 4 centimeters, is 1 kilometer. So each week I went out to explore 1 grid square. So 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer, in an attempt to see everything that was in there in 1 week. And the next week I go to a different grid square and repeat the process.
And sorry, I was just distracted by Jake's message, who said he's watching along with his 7-year-old. She's going to World Book Day next week as Lucy from The Girl Who Rode the Ocean. How cool is that?
That is very cool. I hope Jake is going to build her a large cardboard boat that she can also sit in to go to school in.
The challenge is set. Jake, let us know what your daughter's called. We'd love it to say hello. But that, how cool is that? I mean, I think we often talk in Adventurous Inc. about maps and books and how we love a book that starts with a map. And I guess I do this because I love maps. I studied geography at university because I loved maps. Colouring in, of course, the two fundamental things of every geography course. But I'm intrigued, Al, as to what you studied at university to come up with a dissertation like, what was it? Agnostic communication of coots. Wow.
Well, agnostic communication of Coots might be something a bit different. It was agonistic communication, which is about the
Still don't know what that means.
confrontational behavior. So I did a zoology degree, which I'm really ashamed to say was totally wasted on me. I spent most of my degree just planning getting out of university and going off to cycle around the world. I think it was wasted on the young, as my dad always used to say that. I thought it was such an old man thing to say, but I'm now realizing how true it was. I completely wasted my degree. And one thing I realized doing this book was just how fascinating and wonderful and interesting zoology and science is, and yet I found it so boring when I was sitting in a classroom learning it at the University of Edinburgh. So yeah, I feel in many ways that my nature education just began with this book, really, through Google and Wikipedia, really.
The reference to I'm still tickled that I thought it was agnostic communication. And what was
Yes, that's
antagonistic?
yeah. And Coots do look a bit like Vickers, don't they? They're black and they're white. So yeah, that could be that's a different thesis altogether.
Well, there's your next book title. So,
Okay.
you can have that. You can have that one for free. But because it had mentioned communication in there, I thought you may have studied, media or English or something like that, because you've got a real talent for writing. There's beautiful bits in this, and it's the same with all the books. I mean, it's one of the reasons why we've had so many of your books on, I guess.
Thank you. Well, I'll say on that note then that thank you. That's kind of you to say. But from my education, I found at school books and reading and writing so boring that I quit English as soon as I possibly could. So I haven't really done any proper books or writing or anything since GCSE. So again, that was another completely wasted opportunity of mine. But yeah, I used to find books so tedious the way they were taught in English at school, but I love books a lot now.
So in the book you feature lots of other authors. I mean, Thoreau is there in practically at the start of every chapter, but we've got Orwell and Macfarlane and Mary Oliver and John Clare. I mean, these are the greats, and you've kind of been able to go through and cherry pick them all and put them all in there. So I guess if you weren't inspired by books at school, you must have found a love for literature at some point.
Yeah, I'm not sure about literature. I always feel duty bound every so often to read some proper literature, and then I get confused by it. But yeah, books very much so. But my reading has evolved, I guess, a lot over the years. I was initially really hooked on the big epic expedition adventure type stuff, the Worst Journey in the World, or Annapurna, or Benedict Allen, Mad White Giants, these hardcore expedition stuff. And that was very, very much the driver towards me doing the big adventures in my life. And then through doing local, one of the main realizations of the entire project was just how little I knew about so many things, which is briefly a bit depressing, but then it's quite exciting because suddenly it just opens up this whole new world of new books to read and new topics to read. And so I've very much moved from reading hardcore travel books to much more nature writing, I suppose, over the last few years.
And I'm putting you on the spot a little bit now, though. But is there a favorite other author or poet who you quoted in the book? Is there a bit that particularly of someone else's work that particularly speaks to you?
Oh gosh. Well, I suppose there's lots of examples, but so I think for a book to stay in your head for a lot of years is quite a rare thing. So I read a lot of books, think, wow, that's amazing, and then it sort of gradually drifts away. But I read Pilgrim at Tinker Creek by Annie Dillard. 20 years ago, I was cycling through Siberia in the middle of winter, reading Annie Dillard's Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. And that book has stayed with me for 20 years, mostly because it's just full of wonder. She's down on her hands and knees by her little stream, just looking at little insects and just being awestruck by them. So yeah, her capacity for just paying attention and being amazed by everything stands out. I haven't actually read it for a few years, so I might find it boring now, but that impact of it very much has stayed with me.
I'm fascinated by what you were saying there about kind of going from reading the big adventure greats and going on the great adventures yourself to slowing down and taking the time to notice stuff and then writing about that yourself. And I'm sure that'll inspire other people to slow down a bit and do that. And I'm sure, hearing things like, how nature was a bit of a backdrop when you were out on your expeditions will probably make people think about the last time they went for a climb or a hike or a kayak and what they saw while they were out there and what they didn't. Do you feel that you've got something to share with people? Some, like, this is a way of being that would be good for more people to embrace. Is that part of the work, do you think?
um I'd be very hesitant to offer any suggestions that the way I live aspects of my life are what other people should do. I'd be very, very cautious. I'd added large government health warning to that. But so I'll just answer it on a personal level, which is that I've found that paying attention locally, slowing down, choosing to regularly step away from the computer and spend just a little bit of time just outdoors where I live, and then to enjoy and be interested in being outdoors where I live, rather than being resentful and regretful that I'm not somewhere wild and exotic like New Harmony, Indiana, and dreaming that adventure must be on the distant side of the globe. That's been very helpful for me. I think one aspect of this whole project which really struck me was that the realization that I think the most important part of travel is not the geography of where you go to, but the mindset with which you travel wherever you happen to be. So you can go to somewhere really wild and exotic, middle of Papua New Guinea, and just be a head down, unobservant Luddite, or you can go look at the tiny little patch of dirt around the back of your house and find all sorts of wild and wonderful things.
What we're talking about, Tim's asked a question there about whether you've read Aldo Leopold's Sand County Almanac, which we featured in Adventurous Inc. Some point last year.
Very good. Yeah, one of the things that struck me from that book is that the notion that until you know about the ecology and what's going on around you, then you can just bumble along in a cheerful days about life, which is very much how I approach. So for England's green and pleasant land, think, oh, this is a lovely green, pleasant land. But once you get some sort of, I think he calls it an ecological awakening, that once you start to realize that, oh, this green and pleasant land is actually a completely empty desert monoculture with no wildlife. There's this an ecological grief. So I think I've got share Aldo Leopold's ecological grief. Wow, Tim has got a tattoo of a wolf from Aldo's book. Tim Freno, I think maybe what you need to start doing is a tattoo from each month's book.
Look,
to go with your original tattoo.
I've got the logo of the business tattooed down my arm.
That was my first ever time I came across you. I saw this video of this crazy guy who's going to set up a thing called Adventurous Inc. and he got a tattoo of it down his arm. That was a very good bit of early marketing you did.
There you go. That's I'm stuck with it now. Like, there's going all in, and then there's getting it tattooed down your arm, isn't there? But there we go. It's not the only tattoo. I do have others. So when I was writing the interview questions, I was kind of taken in lots of different directions about the insights that Al had and the lessons that he learned. And then when I was looking back, I kind of realized that we weren't really doing justice to what he talks about in the book, which is about loving his local place. Because if he'd been out exploring somewhere exotic, we'd ask him to tell us about it. So before we do all of that, what did you learn? And what were the insights that you had? I'd like Al to tell us about one of the things that you found. Maybe that the chalk stream under the motorway bridge, or the 6-meter tree, the oak tree in the middle of the snowfield. Just take us there, Alfred. Just for a minute, to do justice to the places that you've seen that were so magical when you were there.
Okay, so the map that I've been exploring is a fairly average bog standard corner of southeast England. It's sort of there's towns, motorways, factories. This sort of orange glow of street lights overhead. You can always hear the motorway. That's there are pylons everywhere, but there are also fields and hills and woods and 1,000-year-old churches and all this sort of jumble of things. And one thing I tried to remind myself was that to me this looks very ordinary and very familiar, and dare I say boring, because it's what I'm so familiar with. But I have to remind myself, how would this look if I was someone else? Imagine if I was a hillbilly in the Hicks of New Harmony, Indiana, how I might feel to see these pylons and trees and to try and get that sort of fresh wildness to it. And so, yeah, I guess to give you a couple of tasters of things, I really loved finding quiet, tiny little churches, say, where the doors were not locked. They often are, but sometimes they're not. You can go in and sit there where someone sat for 700, 800, 900 years before you, or these trees that stood there for hundreds of years right next to modern high-speed railway lines, which hopefully will outlive the high-speed railway lines. And I think before I started, I was really looking forward to finding the woods and the hills and the little streams, all the stuff that I've usually been banging on about for so long. And of course, they are nice. It's nice to go and find a new bit of woodland. Of course it is. But what surprised me was how much I really enjoyed the sort of forgotten, broken down, ignored, back of beyond sort of places. The broken down bits of concrete behind the warehouse where the trees are starting to grow back up and the bushes are starting to grow again. I really enjoyed. I think they were probably my favorite wild places. I can't honestly pretend there's any wilderness where I live, but I did feel the sense of wildness at times, mostly in those sort of broken down, forgotten kind of places.
And I love the things that you did discover in those places, like the riding along and smelling pizza. And then I was thinking, oh, he's near a Pizza Express or something, and then it turns out you're riding along a stream that's paved with margarine, a path that's paved with margarine, and it was magical. And I loved, because you obviously learned a lot while you were out there about the nature that you were going through, and that was really part of the book, was your learning about this and sharing it with us. I'm only gutted that my iPhone's too old, that it won't allow me to download the Merlin app. It's like, no, you can't know what the birds are because you haven't got the latest technology. But it was beautiful though, Al. It was really, really good to see, like, it's not like a hair shirt thing of, we can't use technology and it's intruding on this. It's like, no, technology can be great if we use it in the right way and use it to enhance our experience. And you certainly did that.
Well, for me, the technology is a sort of love-hate fine line type thing, in that I'd be trying to make the most of not having technology, so to be away from my phone and to actually be out enjoying these places I was in, and resisting the tyranny of the emails or the ridiculousness of me checking BBC Sport 25 times a day. So I really enjoyed not doing those sort of things. And yet at the same time, the phone was very useful for the couple of apps you mentioned there, Merlin and Seek, which really enhanced my enjoyment of the natural world I was in by teaching me about stuff that I was seeing out there. So there's no sort of correct answer, but I think it's a bit of a yin and a yang and a bit of a tugging backwards and forwards.
And then I loved the way that you teamed that with the spiraling out and using the places that you went to and place the place that all things come together as a way of telling stories. What did you call them? You called them tenuous segues and questionable meanderings. Should I be researching lip reading or badgers? It was brilliant because places where it all makes sense, isn't it? That's the scale where it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, geez, there's a lot of rambling in this book, and anyone who finds it a bit tedious and too long will be relieved to hear that it was originally more than double the length. So I've chopped out vast amounts of stuff, and it's a really hard thing, because someone might read the little bit about badgers and think, wow, this is so interesting, I want to know more about badgers, and someone else will be like, oh, I wish there'd been more about the history of lip reading for deaf people, and then someone else, maybe a saner person, would have think both of these things are nonsense. So it was very hard for me to know what was interesting, because on the one hand, none of it was relevant, but it was completely at the whim of what I happen to spot at any sort of moment. So perhaps I look over there and I see something that makes me think about badgers. If I'd walk down the lane looking there, I'd be learning about lip reading. So there's not a lot of sense or method to these sorts of things. And it really was just the vagaries of not just the journey I had out there, but then the internet journey when I came home, which was one I hadn't anticipated at all when I started this project. But I took loads of notes each week, and then I'd come home and spend several hours just Googling all this random stuff that I'd seen along the way. And it was very hard to know when I was doing this Googling. I would think to myself, am I actually working here, or am I just massively wasting time on the internet? And it was very hard to know the answer. I'm still not entirely sure of the answer of that. But so yeah, just follow my curiosity down random internet rabbit holes until it was lunchtime, and then I'd get hungry and come back and write something about something else. There was no structure to it, which hopefully might work, but I could see that might be annoying and tedious to some other people as well.
There might not be much structure, but I can detect a philosophy there. And you quoted Jesse Owen, who said, "Find the good and start believing in it." And I think that's what you were doing. You were finding stuff and starting to believe in it, and it leans into that. It leans into that thing about there's beauty wherever you choose to look.
Yeah, without a doubt, that I think the beauty wherever you choose to look was something that I really started to enjoy myself. And I worry at times I was laying on a bit too much in spades as I start to wax lyrical about the beauty of a smashed beer bottle and the beautiful sunlight sparkling on those little silver vape things that you find lying all over the place. So but once I just had this determination, which came quite early on, to just think that, right, literally everything I see might be interesting, and to have to sort of force myself into that sort of mentality, then it really did become so. And now that I've finished this, I'm not now going out every single week. I've sort of drifted out of that habit a bit. But when I do go places now, I do find myself obsessively curious about every little thing I see, and I feel that that's a nice benefit of the whole experience.
And I'm sure it kind of benefits others. I mean, David's just commenting on the chat there about taking his children out and on adventures and sharing that with them. And that's kind of what we're all like your little kids, Al. We're just trotting along with you as you tell us about the things that you've seen. Look at that woodpecker. Isn't that amazing? Oh, I need to ask you. I could have Googled this, I'm sure. I might not even be pronouncing it, but right. But what's a Dean hole? Denehole. What's that?
Yeah, the Dean hole was the closest that I came in this entire year to anything even closely approaching the slightest hint of adventure or jeopardy. I can't even, so I'm having to flog this for all it's worth. But essentially, Dean holes are very small chalk mines that were all over the chalky parts of England, and they're from hundreds and hundreds of years ago, when chalk was one of the few sources of fertilizer, really. So people didn't want to just dig a big pit to get the chalk out, because the pit would then fill up with leaves, and also digging a pit wasted their precious little bit of land. So they dig these vertical shafts down underground through the soil into the rock, and then hollow out a chalk pit. And the one that I found was probably about the size of a smallish room. So you drop down a couple of meters through the ground using my climbing rope, my head torch. I felt very adventurous. I felt like Bear Grylls for about 2 minutes. And then down there you are, a little chalk mine underground. And it's quite cool. It's cool to see something like that that's maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, 900 years old, that people don't really go down very often. It's quite exciting to get your climbing rope out in a suburban little wood. But I think the overall thing that I liked the most about it was that I'd spent the whole morning diligently exploring my grid square, and I really came home thinking, yes, I've seen everything there is to see in this grid square. Aren't I doing well at being an explorer? And then when I started all my Googling about what I'd seen, I learned that, oh, in that wood, you missed a Dean hole, which is literally the most exciting thing on your entire map. And I hadn't even seen it. So I had to go back to the grid square and then discover this. So that was a reminder to me that you can't possibly see everything there.
Yeah, but even from the bits that you do see, you can learn so much, can't you? It's like that the universal is in the particular, and like even with the Dean holes and the chalk streams and stuff, like the reader gets a sense of the richness of the place. It really comes through. The same with the churches. You know, I think for us it can be quite common to yeah, there's a 12th century church there. Whereas when you're in New Harmony, Indiana, you guys are going to get mentioned all the way through, aren't you? You probably don't have many 12th century churches kicking around in the back streets. So it's like it's all in the eye of the beholder. And I mean, you talked a lot not a lot, but you talk in the book about other people's experience, and I and then there's that wonderful phrase "sonder," isn't there? And that seemed to be what you were talking about. This miraculous understanding that everyone else is living lives just as rich as yours, but just viewed through their own perspective. I guess that's where you were going a bit, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think one of my regrets of the book is that it doesn't have many other people in it. And if I had more stories from other people, it would definitely have been a more interesting book. But that's just down to my own antisocial nature. I unfortunately, but one of my thinkings as I came towards the end of the year, thinking, oh wow, I know all of my map, I've seen all my map, was just this realization that there are, I don't know how many, 100,000, 200,000 people living on my map, a lot of people, each one who is in some ways as invested with me as invested as me in this neighborhood that we share together, and with probably equally valid claims on what the land should be used for and what's important about this. So trying to juggle all these different people's hopes and dreams and fears and ambitions with also everyone's interpretations of how the land should be used, how the land should be accessed, whether it's better to have a riding school for kids or a field full of dairy cows or a golf course or a shopping center, how we use and divide our land. There's once you start to think about all the different human interpretations of one map, then it becomes very broad as well. It's not just my map, it's our map, even if I didn't really see many people.
Just as you talk about it being my map, I love the bit at the end where you talk about it being your home and your plastic floating in the canal, and it is all ours, isn't it? And it's so easy to see that's someone else's, for good or bad, when actually it's all us. It is us.
Yes, exactly. It's a collaborative effort for good or for ill, I suppose. The good stuff that happens and the wrecking of it. Yeah, it's a team effort.
Good and bad. I was going to take up Chris Freed on his question there. Do you want to read from the book, Al? You're welcome to. Or you don't have to.
Not particularly. I spent a lot of time reading. I'm quite bored of it now. So when I write a book, I literally never look at it ever again. Because if I do, I'll be like, oh, this page sucks. I want to rewrite this entire thing. So to be honest, I'd rather answer people's questions. But
let's go to Lisa's question though, where she says, were you always this curious, or did the process change how you learn? Great question. Thanks, Lisa.
No, I definitely was not this curious. And I try to be kind to my younger self, but I do now look back on some of my experiences, like some of the incredible places that I spent years cycling through. And I just think, geez, I paid literally no attention to anything that I was doing. And I'll be kind to myself and just attribute that to my youth. But even, in very recent times of me doing micro adventures in this neighborhood where I live, I definitely was not curious at all. So it is a consciously learned new approach to life, I think.
Well, we're all much the richer for it. So thank you. There was a question earlier on about using the random number generator to find all the squares. to choose your squares. And what did Nigel say? How did you deal with private land? Did you avoid it and pick another square if needed, or did you go for it and ask for forgiveness later? Go on.
So I used a random number generator to choose what grid squares I went to. And the reason I did that is because probably like a lot of us on this call, I love maps. And if I open a map, I get really excited and start thinking, oh, look, that'd be a great place to cycle. That'd be a great place to camp. So I have a lot of preconceptions and cognitive biases about what is a good grid square. And what I wanted to try and do in this map was not just go to the usual places that I go to, not just go to the woods and the hills and stuff. I wanted to see everywhere. And so by having a random number generator, it forced me to go to the seemingly really boring square with no grid lines and just the local council tip, for example. And then, surprise, it turns out to be really wild and fascinating. So I'm very glad that I did the random approach. I really appreciated that. If it was private land, then what would I do? Well, only 8% of England is open access land for everyone to roam on. So pretty much all the time, there was the issues of private land. The plus side for adventuring in Britain, in England and Wales is our amazing, wonderful network of footpaths, which is fantastic. And for most of my things I do in my life, and if we're going for runs and stuff, then the footpath network is brilliant and perfectly adequate. But for trying to properly get to know where I live, to properly get to know my map, for almost all of it to be privately owned, enclosured off and off limits, was just not really a good way for me to learn about where I lived. And I've always had a fairly lax approach to trespassing, because for all my years of micro adventures, that's essentially been saying to people, go sleep on a hill. You'll be trespassing, but don't worry, because you'll arrive late, you'll leave early, you won't leave any litter behind. And if anyone finds you, you probably have a little chat. They'll think you're a bit eccentric, and then you'll have a nice chat, and that'll be the end of it. But no one will find you. It'll be fine. And I hadn't really thought much about access beyond that. That's pretty much been the limit of my approach to it. But this year really changed that, because this year, every week when I was wanting to get to know my neighborhood, my home area, I was told, keep out, private, no access. And I'm quite happy. Well, a few things. So because I'm quite good at reading maps and stuff, I can interpret that, oh, if I go through that wood, I'll pop out the other side onto a little road. That'll be a nice little cut through. That's fine. Also, I've spent so much time in the outdoors, I feel quite comfortable with just roaming around. I feel that I sort of belong in the countryside. But I was very aware that for a lot of people who are not so familiar with the outdoors and maps and stuff, that if they were trying to explore this grid square and they came up against all these keep out, private property, go away, I'll shoot you sort of signs, then they would feel very excluded, not welcome, and not able to explore that landscape. And that started to annoy me. And then the other thing that annoyed me is that ultimately I would just ignore these signs and go wandering off. And I kind of knew that if any farmer found me, and I'm a sort of bumbling, cheerful old sort of posh bloke, I go, oh, hello, hello. We'd have a cheerful old chat, and then in a couple of minutes we'd be best mates and it would all be fine. And I'd sort of bumble away and say, oh, I'm very sorry, and it would be fine. But I wasn't too intimidated. Also, I'm 6 foot tall and moderately athletic, and so not too intimidated necessarily by some farmer bloke. But what if I was different? What if I was a short Asian lady, or someone who was not familiar with the things, or a young black guy who might be treated very differently in the woods? And I just felt that it just doesn't sit right, that I feel that I'm more able to access the outdoors than lots of other people. So increasingly, the right to roam issue became much bigger for me over the course of the year than I'd anticipated it would do at the start. Sorry, that was a very long answer.
It was a great answer, and I know. I mean, we've featured. In fact, we started a whole new subscription when Trespass came out, the book about trespass in England, because it was the kind of a deeper read that I wanted to take readers in, and it sparked a whole new subscription alongside Adventures, because I do think it's good to dwell on that stuff more, and I recognised when you recognised your privilege in the book as well. Isn't the irony though that the one time when you met a farmer who was angry with you crossing his field, you were on a bloody public footpath? I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yes.
I mean, you couldn't make it up.
Yeah, so I got shouted at a couple of times from afar, but the one sort of proper argument I had with a farmer about crossing his land, I was actually just crossing a full-on public footpath. But I think though, to give the guy his due, it's really important to think about this from everyone's perspective. So for this farmer, he just found it really annoying that he's trying to farm his cows in his field and random people go walking through his fields. I mean, I wasn't causing any bother to him, but you can kind of see how that's a bit annoying. You're in your place of work and there's people wandering around. So I can kind of see it from his point of view as well. So he was, yeah, really cross that I was trying to walk down the public footpath. He got really angry at me. But what really struck me about that interaction was that we had this argument about land access and stuff, and it was fairly heated but ineffective, but quite satisfying. But we sort of worked out that we had a mutual good friend. And as soon as he realized we had a mutual good friend, he became very apologetic to me. He's like, "Oh, I'm very sorry. Haven't treated you very kindly. I'm really sorry about this." And that made me realize how then I was then part of his gang again. I belonged. I was one of him. Whereas beforehand, and he hadn't wanted me there, I was an other. I was one of these sort of annoying people from the city who comes and walks across the land. So again, that's another example of the countryside being differently available to different groups of people.
And we're starting to get there was a question earlier on from David who said with the rise in hiking and wild campaign, increase of rubbish and the land disputes and Dalmore, do you think we're going to see a tipping point in the UK where access will improve, or do you think it might become more regulated?
Gosh, so Sweden is the wonderful poster child of the right to roam, the allemansrätten. Oh, you can go wherever you want and right to roam responsibly. I like to add the word responsibly at the end of the phrase. So the right to roam responsibly. Wonderful. This is what we dream of. Sweden has 8 million people to roam across big old lovely Sweden. Everyone's sort of lovely and beautiful, like ABBA and Roxette, and it's all lovely. London.
You're showing your age with particularly the Roxette, Al.
My first album, Roxette, Dress for Success. London has 9 million people, and 9 million people. If all these 9 million people suddenly start to have a full-on right to roam, then that's going to be really tricky. And so I can see that this is really difficult, but it's a circular loop which you can see either negatively or positively. So if suddenly the right to roam opens up, everyone goes wandering around through the countryside and doing it the way people often do at the moment, so chucking Lucozade bottles, hanging dog poo bags, wrecking fields, then that's obviously not good. But in Sweden, because people have done this for a longer time, they're more connected to the land, they care for it, they feel a bit more of a connection and an ownership, and therefore they're not chucking their Lucozade bottles and hanging their dog poo bags, and they're actually more caring about all of the issues there, and therefore probably more likely to vote for governments who do positive things for land. So then you get sort of positive uptick once people feel connected and caring and mutually responsible for it. So it is hard because I can really sympathize with landowners who are trying their best to look after the land, and then people come and do fly tipping, dump their Lucozade bottles, dog poo bottles, dogs running wild, ruining nesting habitats for wild birds. They plant trees and then they get knocked over by quad bikes mucking about. It's really annoying. But then on the flip side, you can't keep everyone out and pretend that the landscape is this beautiful, pristine Jurassic Park Serengeti, which is wonderful, because it's not. Our landscape is wrecked. It's covered in farmers' plastic rubbish. It's got pollution everywhere. Every river in my entire map is polluted by agricultural runoff. We've got some of the least biodiversity in the world, some of the least tree cover in Europe. So the land that we're trying to keep all the peasants off isn't in an immaculate condition. So I don't think that's a valid argument either. So there are pros and cons to both, and I don't know how the solution for this is, but somehow, if it's possible to educate people to roam responsibly, then not only will they not damage the land, but they'll also care for it more and start to take more proactive efforts on the land issues that matter, I think. Sorry, yeah, round and round it goes. That's my short answer.
I'm sort of taken back to an earlier part of the discussion when we were talking about other authors and language, and this idea that actually access to the land doesn't start with stepping out there. It starts in your head and your heart, doesn't it? And if you haven't got the words to know about these places, or no one talks about them, then you can't know them, so you can't feel welcome there, so you're not going to go there. So there's I guess I would say this because I sell books about travel, nature, and the environment, but it's like it's like through reading about this stuff, it draws us in and makes it more accessible in the same way that opening up more open access land does. It opens up those pathways in our head that says this is possible and this is something that we can do.
Yeah, I think the realization that, oh, this is possible is something that I guess all of us, by definition of being on this call, probably underestimate. And there are 70 million, no offense, Tim, but there are 70 million English people who are not on your Zoom call right now because it's never crossed their mind that it might be interesting to go wander around the nearby countryside to where they live. And that was one of my reasons for trying to move away a bit from the micro adventures. I mean, I've loved doing micro adventures and it's been really successful, but it's always been slightly based on the premise of preaching to converted, of people for whom the idea of sleeping on a hill or swimming in a river is sort of vaguely somewhere on the periphery of their vision. And what I was hoping to try to do here is to take it down to a different sort of level, to say that you can find some nearby nature and wildness without needing to have a bivy bag and go and sleep on the top of the hill or a beautiful river to go swim. You can find a bit of wildness and nature wherever you are, even in cities and towns and things. And hopefully, if people can start to enjoy those little pockets of nature and wildness and the fresh air and the outdoors and the clouds and the rain and the wind, then that might then give people a bit of confidence and momentum to venture a bit further afield at their weekends and holidays. And then who knows, the bivy bag beckons ultimately.
All roads lead to a bivy bag. Yeah.
Yes. All roads lead to a purchased but unused bivy bag.
The industry thanks you, Al.
Yes.
I'm just wondering where you think we are on that journey, though. So do you think we're finding ourselves more connected, or is that just the view of this little bubble of the people on this call and the people who are like the people on this call?
No, I think we're much less connected. I think. I mean, but one of the very few things I liked about lockdown beyond beer for breakfast was that when I went out on my runs and stuff that I've been doing for years, for the first time, I'd see other people there, like people ridiculously dressed, like wearing flip-flops to go through the patch of nettles with giant earphones on and stuff, who had never ever been in the woods. And I just loved that. It was great. But so that to me was a time when I thought, oh wow, lots more people are going to get into this. But then lockdown ends and everyone can then just buy an EasyJet holiday off or an EasyJet adventure to go off somewhere else. So I think that was a brief blip of local enthusiasm. And it also caused lots of problems with people saying, oh, there's litter around, so we must ban everyone. So it was a brief enthusiastic blip. But I'm not particularly optimistic on this front, to be honest. I think people spend far less time in the outdoors probably than in the all of human existence, and kids definitely spend less time outdoors than in all of human existence on a smaller radius of exploration than ever before. So no, I think that perhaps the few people on this Zoom call, we're all having a nice time in the outdoors, but I think it's a really massive problem for mental health, physical health, but also really importantly for people actually knowing how the land around us is being wrecked and the implications for that for the environment and the planet and the sort of governments that we choose to have. So no, I'm pretty negative on that front, I'm afraid.
Well, thanks for that. Let's try and end on a high point in the last 5 minutes. But no, I think we all hear you, Alex. It's it's difficult because as much as we can change ourselves, we can't really change other people, and that's and that can be frustrating. But I do think people change in the way that you have, because there's a brilliant bit in the book where you say you had to read a lot of books before you changed your shopping and eating habits. But eventually that drip did get through, and it did lead to a change, didn't it? And I found that a really powerful statement. And again, I'm not just saying this is a bookseller, but it takes, this is the way the mind works. It takes a lot to jolt us out of our steady routine of the things that we know. We're creatures of habit, aren't we? And we seek things that confirm what we believe. So finding ways to jolt ourselves out of that is incredibly hard. But you clearly have done it, and you can just see in the comments in the chat, it clearly influences other people. So it was really important for you to say that there was a time when you didn't change, and now there is a time when you have.
Yeah, so for a long time now, I've had a very, very strict social media / internet policies, best part of 20 years, which has been just whatever I'm thinking about in the whole world, all I'm going to put on the internet or social media is, hey guys, go have adventures. Here's how to have adventures, because it's really good. And I've been really strict for many, many, many years. That's the only thing that I've talked about. There's so much stuff that we all care about. So, bowel cancer or Palestine or the Sudan. There's all these things, but I just had this thing of, right, all I'm going to talk about is this. But as my own sort of behaviors gradually went through the phases of denial, grudging acceptance, resistance, and then sort of reluctant change, and then tedious evangelist, eventually I reached a point where I was like, oh, come on, I can't now be the way I'm living my life is quite different to the me who was just saying adventure's good, go for adventure. So I've sort of felt the need to pop my head above the turret a little bit and start becoming a tedious evangelist, a smug virtue signaling, guardian reading evangelist.
Have you been reading your reviews again?
Yeah. Basically, what I do is I think, what will really annoy my parents, and then I write about that.
Well, I'm sure it's worked for some people, but I'm sure it hasn't. Catherine asked a good question about using photography, because we've not talked much about the photography in the book, but I think the pictures are fab, even just in their black and white form. And when I asked to feature the book and for some pictures of the book, Al very kindly sent me the color versions of lots of the images. They're amazing, very simple, and just this simple elegance to them. But so to ask Catherine's question, do you use photography to see and focus on things differently?
Yes, exactly that. So throughout this whole book, when I would go out, I wouldn't just use my camera phone, which we've all got amazing camera phones in our pockets, but I would deliberately take my actual old-fashioned real camera with me, because then I'd be walking around my map and holding this big lumpy thing in my hand, and that would remind me, oh yeah, I'm here to look, I'm here to look, I'm here to look. And then every week I'd really consciously try and find beautiful things to take pictures of, and particularly things like dog poo bags hanging in trees, or graffiti, or broken bottles. How can I find some beauty and light in that? So yeah, exactly what Catherine said much more eloquently than me, was that I used photography to see things differently. So yeah, that was a really, really conscious thing, and I'd really recommend it. If you haven't got a fancy camera yourself, another thing I do is you can get apps for your phone that are just, it's so silly, but you can get apps that simplify your phone camera. So I've got an app that just turns my camera phone into a bog standard click, black and white, nothing fancy camera. And I really enjoy using that app sometimes, just because then I'm seeing in black and white. And again, you get a different perspective on things.
And it all, so what we're all talking about is how our attention it expands the thing to be known. You talked about it as like a fractal, and I think it was Nan Shepherd who said that the thing to be known grows with the knowing, and it expands like that in this beautiful way, which is clearly what's happening in the book. And someone asked before, has that carried on into other parts of your life? Then is this something that you're stuck with now? Are you bedeviled with it forever?
Yes, definitely. I think it's broadened my curiosity. So I used to read for a lot of years. I obsessively read travel and expedition and exploration sorts of books because that was my world. And now I'm far more of a dilettante with my reading. I just, the random stuff interests me, and I give myself permission to just follow that until I get bored of that and then go down something else. So yeah, very much a believer in that. And I think a good book that was the sort of extrapolation of what I was doing, well, he did it first, it's called A Forest Unseen by David Haskell. He's a biologist, but he goes out almost every day for a year to look at 1 square meter of woodland. And it's just getting ridiculous now, 1 square meter. And he wrote this fantastic book about what he would see in 1 square meter of woodland when you just, the fractal, I guess, you pay attention, and on it goes. Like Merlin Sheldrake's book about fungi, which is these tiny little mushroomy things. And that, again, just the closer you look, the more fascinating things there are.
And I get the sense that you find a real peace and joy in doing that, in being able to slow down and enjoy the moment by trying to be there and acting like you belong there. That's the sense that I get, is that rewards you massively for that, for putting in the effort to do that.
Yeah, I'm quite restless and hyperactive, and like I guess pretty much all of us here, there's some constraints and restrictions and frustrations on my life. And if I was suddenly a free spirit with £1 million and freedom, I'd be far away from this Zoom call right now on my bicycle, far off in God knows where. I'll be on my way to New Harmony, Indiana, before you could say stop. But given the sort of realities of life, and this sort of slowing down, appreciating my local woods, noticing that the spring is arriving, and learning about that and caring about it has been really good for me. Just appreciating that, wow, there's actually loads of cool stuff in my life. The fact that I'm not off in the Serengeti, don't be grumbling about that. Instead, be grateful and appreciative for all that I do have and all the adventurous stuff I can find on my doorstep. So it's been very helpful on a personal level for that sort of thing.
And you know, Al, that really echoes what we hear time and time again from our authors. I mean, we're like a bloody stuck record. I don't know why anyone keeps sticking around for these books and these conversations, because we're just saying the same thing over and over again. But I loved how your book ended with "tell your friends and tell your MP," and that really strikes to there's a different Al Humphreys emerged here. There's an activist. I can see you with a banner somewhere. But I love that. Tell your friends and tell an MP, because I think that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, I guess as I stick my head up, when I start to make changes myself, and then I start to try and encourage other people to think about some changes that might be of interest to them, in my head, I do realize that it makes absolutely no difference what 100 of us adventurous ink folk eat for breakfast. And what really matters is getting a government that cares about these sort of things to make changes. So yeah, it's got to start from the way we buy stuff, the shopping, the influencing we have from that will affect business. The way we vote will affect governments, and it's got to start from the big stuff down. But that's not a get off the hook for not doing stuff ourselves as well. I think there's a really nice group called TakeTheJump.org. I think they live just down the road from you, Tim. TakeTheJump.org, and they've got a really nice starting platform for doing some steps that we can all take. But hopefully, and a really important thing that I think I'd like to say is that one of the reasons I did this local map was because I feel guilty now about jetting off to other parts of the world. And when I started exploring locally, I was slightly worried that I was going to be like this hair shirt martyr person. I'd be like, you guys go to Bali. You other influencers go to Bali. Leave me. I'll be fine. I'll save the world here in my crappy car park. I'll save the world. So I was slightly worried that I was doing a bit of that sort of martyrdom, but actually it was a genuinely fascinating experience. I won't pretend that if you ever get a chance to strap a tent to the back of your bicycle and pedal off for a continent, please go do that. But what I spent a year doing exploring close to home really didn't feel like a bad, worse, lame, monochrome thing to be doing. It was fantastic, and also is good for your smug virtue signaling as well, which is always good for annoying my parents.
And I have to say, I loved the bit where towards the end of the book where you find your perfect view and you're taking it all in. And well, go on, you can tell us what happens.
Yeah, so near the end of the book, I finally find a valley which is wild and beautiful and rugged and like everything that I've been missing in this whole year of boring, flat, agricultural, suburban lands. I found this wooded, contoured, green, verdant sort of valley, and something felt different. The birds were louder, the insects were buzzing, the hedges and trees felt sort of bushier. It just felt different. I honestly couldn't put a finger on it. It just felt really nice. And I was up at the top of the valley, sort of staring out over this domain, thinking, wow, this is great. And two dog walkers approached me, and they clearly saw that I was interested and curious about the land. And I was staring out at it. And the guy came up, he said, oh, it's such a shame, isn't it? I said, what do you mean, such a shame? This place is great. And he said, oh, the golf course. This used to be a golf course, but it's gone now. So 7 years ago, they closed down the golf course, and now it's rewilding. And he said, now there's nothing here, nothing but nature. And I found that such a fascinating exchange. Partly, as I mentioned earlier, that you do need to remember the very different demands and requests of our land for all these people who live on the map. So who's to say that my wish for rewilding is better than his wish for a golf course? So there's that aspect which is important to bear in mind. But in terms of me coming towards the end of a year in which I got pretty depressed a lot of the time about the state of our nation, to see that a golf course, if just left alone, if you do nothing for nature and just leave it, 7 years later, boom, nature's back. I found that really hopeful and uplifting and optimistic.
And there we go. What a hopeful, uplifting, optimistic note to end on. Al, it's been absolutely brilliant. You have to write another book so we can get you back and have another conversation, because I've loved it. You can never tell in these conversations whether I'm going to ask all the questions or everyone else is going to ask all the questions. And you know it's going well when everyone else piles in. So thank you all for asking your questions. I'm sorry for those that we haven't had a chance to get to. This was a conversation that could have gone everywhere and anywhere, and all based on this tiny little area around Al's home and just one map. Oh, one important question we have to ask. What's the hashtag, Al? A single map. There you go. Brilliant. Right, I'm going to take us off pin and we can all do the wavy goodbye thing. I think people still do that. I do it. I'm going to wave you all goodbye. Thank you all for joining us. It's been a pleasure. We do this every month. I mean, you could join us if you wanted. You're more than welcome. But thank you for joining us tonight. Bye, everyone.
This is nice now that you've taken us off pin. I can see everyone. Hello, Susan Cannon, who I stayed with when I cycled through Peru. Lovely to see you again. Hello, Clara, who I stayed with when I micro-adventured in Berlin. Wow, this is great. Hello, everybody.
Hi, Al. Hi, Al.